Hi, and it's time for another music video. I was recently watching one of the videos on an excellent channel, James Griffiths, and he was looking at great opening tracks on albums that he loved, and he selected 12. And I thought, yeah, this thread is worth jumping onto. So I gave it some thought, and I'm going to deliver it today. Uh, However, I had such a wide selection to consider that I've decided to restrict it to albums that came out in 1968 and 1969 when I was a very impressionable 14 and 15 years old. Now, I think I've got about 16, 17 to go through with you, but it has to be said, most of them I love, but the important aspect to this video is these tracks really hit me, made a tremendous impact on how my music love developed and how they were shaped by these tracks. And consequently, that's why I've chosen them. So I'm going to get on with them, fairly brief, but all of these tracks really impacted me in those years, apart from one where it took a little bit longer for me to get hooked. So the first one I want to take a look at is a song called The Chase, which was the opening cut on this tremendous debut album by the English band, Leicester-based band Family, called Music in a Doll's House. I was taken by the eclectic mixtures in this very 60s style album that drew upon subtle jazz and classical styles, mostly through instrumentations. And the tracks blended into each other. Short segments called variations also served as segues. So The Chase, what a start. Dissonant screams causing your hair to stand up. The 60s sound is strong, a heavy string section, some mellotrons, some various speed effects, and of course Roger Chapman's voice standing out as one of a kind. And the changing musical phrases take no time to rest. A song about the hunt for love and obsession. The tension builds as the song wraps up. Quickly moving on to my second, and this one was a slow burner. In fact, in 68, I actually hated this track and all of the album. However, by the end of the 70s, it had become a true favourite. It's Van Morrison's Astral Weeks from 1968, and it opened up with the title track. And of course, there's that effortless singing, We Are Going to Heaven, with the strings that cushion him like a big fat cloud. If you can take on this monster, the rest of the tracks just float into the psyche. And this opener was a 7-minute 22 gem. And here's the initial lyric to give you a flavour. If I ventured in the slipstream between the viaducts of your dream, where immobile steel rims crack and the ditch in the back roads stop, could you find me? Would you kiss my eyes to lay me down in silence easy, to be born again, to be born again? Oh, I can hear it now. Right, now moving on to my next song, opening cuts, of course. This is called Song from Our Ancestors. It's by the Steve Miller Band, and it was the opening cut on their second album, Sailor, that was released in 68. Amazing song list. It's instrumental, and it's completely different to the rest of the album. Foghorns announced the almost lysergic drone of this track, the slow, hazy instrumental. It's a complete contrast, as I say, to the rest of the album, which combines psychedelic pop and blues rock. But it hooked me in with curiosity. And when I listen to this now, I immediately return to being 14 years old, highly impressionable by the music of that age. And to my fourth offering, this is an album called SF Sorrow by the Pretty Friends, also released in '68, regarded as the first concept rock opera, and it launched us into the life story of that magic, mystical, convoluted tale about SF Sorrow. Hugely psychedelic in its sound and lyrically a bit hard to decipher. The classic status that it's held in now was in sharp contrast to 1968, when it was largely ignored by critics and fans alike. As I say, it epitomised underground music at the time, and this was the title track. And the Pretties were raised on a very much Beatles harmonies, Rolling Stones grittiness, Kinks humbleness, and Hendrix-style guitars, with an early aspect of Pink Floyd's schizophrenia. So don't forget this one, SF Sorrow. My fifth offering is from the second album by Captain Beefheart and the Magic Band, called Strictly Personal. Now, the opening track on this is called I Feel Like Acid, and it's really something about nothing, but it was a statement about this album, and it basically led you on inquisitively through it, and it sort of enables you to fall in love with the drug experimentation and that American Delta blues roots. It was also helped by the fact that this album was played to death by one John Peel on his radio show Top Gear, which I was an avid listener to. It starts in a rousing drunken style shriek from the captain, which leads into some harmonica and a guitar, which duets before the captain rejoins the craziness. And, of course, the title, reflective of the beginning of the use of lysergic acid diethylamide, LSD to you, and, of course, its nickname was acid. Moving on, Crazy World of Arthur Brown, the opener on this album, I played and played and played. It's called Prelude Stroke Nightmare. And it took you into the freaky craziness of Brian's psyche. And this opener leads you straight to the crux of the mindful psychosis, with Vincent Crane on organ meshed with Brown's vocals, which quickly positions listeners in the zone of horrific dreams. Wonderful stuff. And I really love that song. Next up is Blind Faith, a great opener, Can't Find My Way Home, from a rather indifferent album, their debut and their only release. Of course, it had in its personnel Stevie Winwood, who come over from Traffic, and Eric Clapton from Cream. So they were the first super rock group, and also Baker on drums. As I say, it's an absolutely revered song, and I love it, sang by Winwood perfectly. And it's still a song that's played live regularly by them. Sadly, I haven't seen him for years, but will not be forgotten. Right, my next selection is from the 1969 debut album by Crosby, Stills and Nash, and you will recall that the opener was Sweet Judy Blue Eyes. Three giants of pop music, of course, collaborating together, although this is a Steve Stills song, and it really hits you when you hear it. An ode to his girlfriend, Judy Collins. Gorgeous, an absolute classic, and probably the greatest acoustic multi-part suite ever written. A love song. Lyrics are beautiful, the melodies intertwine and gracefully flowing into one another, and it takes your breath away. Terrific sing-alongs, foot stompers, with Stills and Crosby interlocking guitars, which creates a wonderful rich sound texture that you won't often hear on an acoustic song. And of course, it set the whole album off. Fantastic. Next, excuse me, it's the pollution here. Next up is Empty Sky, the title track, which was the opener on this album by Elton John. It was his debut, largely ignored by all, and it's a rocker that explodes out of your speakers. His swinging piano chords, his magnificent high-pitched singing voice, and, of course, Taupin's lyrics, and guitarist Caleb Quaye, who was a significant partner, musical partner for Elton in those early days. And it's a head-banging rocker, mostly piano-driven, of course, but it turns itself into a moody, ominous jam halfway through, and I love it. So there we are, Empty Sky, Elton John. Next up is a second album by Free, just called Free, and the opening cut, I'll Be Creeping. I just love this band. And I'll remember listening to them live outside a very small club about 10 miles from where I lived. And I couldn't get in because it was full. But I stayed and listened outside the venue to a glorious set. Charge blues rock number about the attraction of the opposite sex. And here's the first verse. If you are trying to screw me, baby, take my advice. Opportunity, baby, never knocks twice. If you're trying to fool me, baby, don't play around. Because when I get to you, baby, I won't make no sound. Because I'll be creeping. I'll be creeping, baby. Awesome. Next, Arthur, the decline of the form of the British Empire by the Kinks, released in 1969, and the opening cut was Victoria. This is a great pop song that launched this tongue-in-cheek comedic look at the British monarchy. Great album set up by this glorious single about Queen Victoria. Who else? Right, this is my 12th choice, and this is off Beggar's Banquet by the Rolling Stones, released in 1968. And, of course, the opening track, iconic, Sympathy for the Devil, one of their best singles with a conga beat, one of Keith Richards' rare razor-sharp solos, a chorus of presumably restless natives chanting hoo-hoo, and Mick chewing right through the imagery in his guise as the Prince of Darkness. What followed this were songs that meant this was the band's best ever, in my opinion. And here's the opening lyric to this absolute gem. Please allow me to introduce myself. I'm a man of wealth and taste. I've been around for a long, long year, stole many a man's soul and faith. And I was round when Jesus cried, had his moment of doubt and pain, made damn sure that pilot washed his hands and raised his faith. Pleased to meet you. Hope you guess my name. But what's puzzling you is the nature of my game. Awesome. Next up, this one you won't have heard. It's by John Mayall. His album Bare Wires, and it's not really a song. It's called the Bare Wires Suite, and it took up the whole of side one, all 23 minutes of it, and described as a medley. And his band included Mick Taylor, later of the Stones, bassist Tony Reeves, and drummer John Heisman. And so it was very jazzy, this, and it really set up a great album with John Mayall at the helm on vocals, piano, organ, and everything else, really, plus the horns provided by Chris Mercer on tenor and baritone, and Dick Hextall-Smith on tenor and soprano. And Henry Lowther finished it off on cornet and violin. It's an absolute superb piece of music. And so to my 14th cut, and we will be ending it soon. This is from the Edgar Broughton Band. It's their debut album, released in 1969, I think, or was called Waz or Waza. And the opener, The Death of an Electric Citizen, a sonic blast of turbo-powered cosmic gut blues. I lifted that quote, of course, from a review. The perfect vehicle for Edgar's growling, howling wolf persona. This is heavy, heavy blues. A story behind it. I went round my friend's house after school and he sat me down and gave me a cloak and he said, listen to this, John. It's absolutely terrific. And he had this little record player, very small, really only for singles. And he put this huge 12-inch LP on this very small player. And when this music started, I thought I was on another planet. It was so heavy, so underground blues rock, and I thought I was sort of being transformed, and it had such a powerful impact on my future music that I later saw them live. But Death of an Electric Citizen, wow, what an intro! So my 15th choice is from the Keith Hartley Band. It's from their debut album, Half Breed. Most of these great tracks are from debuts. And it's not music as such. It's a phone call from John Mayall, Keith's boss, sacking him from the Blues Breakers, which resulted in the birth of Keith's band and this debut. And then this was a tremendous album. What followed the phone call was a sort of a segues into a Wait-like violin piece before booming into the first track, which drew together those blues rock jazz segments, combining them all together. An absolutely terrific sound it was as well. Next up is Stand Up from Jethro Tull, their second, and the opener on this, A New Day Yesterday. Very much rooted in blues music. It's got a propulsive bass rhythm, some great exhilarating guitar work by Martin Barr, and the obligatory flute work by Anderson, and an interesting vocal. It sets up this 5-star album, and I consider this album to be their best. Yeah, better than Ackler one. So there we go. That's A New Day Yesterday, the opener on Stand Up by Jethro Tull. So I'm going to try and wrap it up now. Next up, which I think is my 17th choice, is from the 10 Years After album called Shh. That's 4 S's and an H. And the opener is a track called Bad Scene. It's a terrific blues psychedelic rock album, this, launched by this opener, which sees Alvin Lee introduce us to his fast, tantalizing fretwork alongside great keyboards and a very solid rhythm, especially from Leo Lyons' bass runs. It's practically hardcore punk, really, a breathtaking speed and a gruff guitar tone. But there's some tricky changes in signature, and it's got a special jazzy middle eight. Alvin's solos are very strange electronically, with the vocals encoded. And it's got everything if you love to play pretend guitar in your bedroom. And it launched this absolutely awesome album that I love. So to my next selection, and this is from Frank Zappa's Hot Rats. It's the opening cut, Peaches on Regalia, a kaleidoscope of psychedelic jazz rock, alternating in a dozen different themes that range from pure jazz, dominated by the brass, and there's even some artificially spaded up drumming. It's got a childish jazz style, but I absolutely love it, and it acts as a doorway into the rest of this mostly instrumental album. Definitely Frank's finest hour. And my final selection, you'll be breathing a sigh of relief. This is from the debut by Led Zeppelin, released in 1968. And all of you will recall that it's called Good Times, Bad Times. And it basically launched this band into my listening palette and into the whole album. After Page's production hit this fast rock riff. And, of course, Plant's explosive vocals. were a highlight here. There's the lyric, the first couple of verses. In the days of my youth, I was told what it means to be a man. And now I've reached that age, I've tried to do all those things the best I can. No matter how I try, I find my way into the same old jam. Good times, bad times. You know, I've had my share. When my woman left home with a brown-eyed man, well, I still don't seem to care. 16, I fell in love with a girl as sweet as could be. It only took a couple of days till she was rid of me. She swore that she would be all mine and love me to the end. But when I whispered in her ear, I lost another friend. Well, this basically sums up what it's like to be at that tender age, 14, 15, 16. And it was summed up perfectly in this track, which led into the rest of this awesome album. Still the best that they ever did, in my opinion. So thank you for being patient as I waltzed through these 19 songs. Great album openers, or just pieces of music that hooked me into these classic albums. That's my lot.